Beautiful.
Hello, lovers of the world. This is Cynthia speaking. I really love listening to new music. I think there's such a joy and a sense of triumph when you purposefully look out for new things, broaden your horizons, and end up finding something so completely new and something that you love with all your heart, if that makes sense. So every month, I reflect on all the things that I've listened to and rank them in a tier list, and I share my reviews with you guys. So, just for people who are not familiar with the tier list, in case we have some new watchers in the audience, I'll explain the tier list. However, if you are familiar with the ranking system that I have already established, you're welcome to skip ahead. By the way, I have other videos detailing what I listened to in the past month. So if you're keen on watching what I've previously reviewed, you're welcome to go ahead and watch those videos after you've watched this one, of course. So the S tier is the highest tier, and I call that year-end list material. So every year, basically, I collect around 15 best albums of 2023 of the year. This tier list is basically a way for me to keep track of all the releases that I really liked as time goes on. And it also just reminds me to look back on these candidates for when I start collecting albums for that specific list. Now, for the purposes of this tier list, only 2023 releases are allowed in this tier. And when I put an album in S tier, I'm basically saying, oh, this album is really, really good. And I feel like it has some longevity in the sense that I'll probably continue listening to this album as the year passes on. Now, ideally, I would hopefully find maybe one or two albums to put in this tier list, but if I don't have anything to put in that tier list for that month, then that's just how it is. And then the second highest tier is a tier I call French Toast. So this tier is for albums that I find are perfectly enjoyable, but are also where I would put any album that I really, really loved, but was released in a different year. However, if the album was released in 2023 and I initially put it in A tier, that album can still move up into S tier or maybe move down in any of the below tiers. It just depends on how I feel about that album as time progresses. And I am open to changing my mind. So yeah, anything aside from S tier, like any of the albums can really be changed depending on whether or not I change my mind, right? Tier below that is kind of like the middle ground, and I call it Gems Found in the Mind. This is a tier for all the albums that I felt were good, but like were mostly forgettable. But it's also where I put albums where I think as a whole weren't too memorable, but they did have some B-sides that I thought were really, really good. So ergo, there were some gems found in the mind, but you have to like spend some time to find them, but you'll be rewarded for your effort. And then the tier below that I call, well, at least I learned something new. So this is for albums where I tried to expand my horizons. I tried to keep up with some releases, and I felt like I either learned that this album wasn't for me, or I learned that maybe this particular genre or this particular artist is moving in a direction that I'm not particularly into. So, and then the lowest tier, unfortunately, I call the eggs you break for your French toast. So obviously it's a play on the second highest tier, French toast. And this is a way for me to look at all the albums that I don't like in a more positive way. So obviously in your search for music that you love, you'll find stuff that you may not necessarily relate to for whatever reason that may be. You have to break a few eggs to make a French toast. Now, as a disclaimer, just because I put an album in this tier doesn't mean that I don't like the artist that made it. I'm very flexible in terms of like the music that I listen to. So even if I really, really love an artist, I might put their album, their output in that particular tier if I don't like that. And it also works vice versa. Like maybe I don't particularly like this other artist for whatever reason that may be, but then if their output is really, really good, then I'll put them obviously in a deserving tier. Cool. So now that that's out of the way, let's get to actually ranking this. So as you can see, I've used the same tier list as last month, and this is because I really wanted to kind of see everything that I've listened to in one place, and it helps me contextualize all the new stuff that I will eventually put in the tiers. So everything is of course relative, so you know, like, is this album as good as this album? Is this album as bad as this album that I've previously listened to? It just helps me visualize everything better. Let's get to ranking. Cool. So first thing I listened to at the beginning of the month, so everything's kind of like in chronological order. I listened to Tiger and Water, which is an EP by an artist called Avi. And this was released in August 2022. Now, I'm actually going to put this in B tier. I think I followed them on Twitter. They're an artist and a digital artist, and I followed them on Twitter. And they were promoting this EP that they made. And I guess I just wanted to check it out. This musician is also part of a duo called Avi and Surashu, who famously did the Steven Universe soundtrack. Steven Universe is a TV show that I love. So I thought, oh, cool. More of this whimsical, like fun sound that Steven Universe is kind of like known for. And it's exactly what I found in this EP. However, the only track that I really, really enjoyed was the first track called One and Only. But otherwise, I don't really remember anything else from the EP. And then because I was also looking for more, I guess, ambient instrumental music to listen to while I edit my videos, I also listened to this EP called Roots by an artist called Quarkimo. And this was released in July 2022. And I think I'm going to put this in C tier. So I thought this was a lot more like ambient music than I expected it to be. Good vibes for like background music, but it's not really something that I would listen to again. However, one of the last is a track called Bloom, and I actually really like it. It's beautifully written, and the song actually reminds me of like a solo song from a musical theater play. It gives off like the vibes of somebody frolicking in the woods as they like ponder the meaning of life. But as much as I love this song, it's not really enough to like put the EP up as a whole in a higher tier. Then I listened to this album called 1999 by a band called PPCX. This was released in July 2018, and I actually really, really like this. So I'm putting this in A tier. I'm putting this in A tier. It just has really, really great tracks, and I kind of came across this by accident, so definitely something I will probably keep returning to. Then I listened to Shoebox by Epic High. I don't really know a lot about Epic High, and I asked my friend for like a recommendation, I guess, a place to start, and he recommended Shoebox. I'm gonna put this in B tier, just because I feel like my taste in hip-hop isn't really developed, and so I don't really feel like, even though it wasn't for me, I couldn't really pinpoint exactly why just yet. It's very like a classically old school hip hop, but it's a bit of a throwback in a lot of ways. And then I listened to Ready to Be by Twice. This is their latest album, and it pains me to put this in here, but I didn't like it, or rather I couldn't remember anything from it. Set Me Free is a good title track in the sense that it builds off well from what Twice is kind of turning into, like a more mature girl group. Plays into the trends of pop music today, but it's just not for me, and I don't remember any of the B-sides. I might return to this. Maybe it's just because I wasn't in the right mood for it, but that's okay. And then I listened to Masterpiece by Gravity, and I'm gonna put this in A tier. I actually quite liked it a decent amount, especially the second half, and the title track is really, really nice. And you know me, I'm very like picky about boy groups, but I really like groovy. Like there's something so fun and fresh about it, and I really appreciate boy group music like that. And they have currently one of the best B-sides I've heard all year from a K-pop group, at least, called A to Z. Like it's just so perfect. I actually ended up putting it in my list for candidates of like best songs of 2023, so we'll see if it stays there. And then I listened to Cherry Dash by Cherry Bullet, and unfortunately I'm putting this in D tier for a lot of reasons. I do really feel like it was a bit of a disappointment because I think the last comeback that they did was last year, which was really good, by the way. I think that album was one of the best K-pop albums of 2022. It's disappointing in the sense that their company didn't really make the most of their promotion in Girls Planet. I don't really like the title track, and none of the B-sides were able to save it as a project. So it was like, I don't know, mostly just, I feel like a wasted opportunity. And then I listened to the Circle EP by Onu. This is his, I don't know if this is his first or second EP as a soloist. But he has returned from the military. And honestly, I really, really, really loved the title track, Circle. It's like one of my favorite K-pop title tracks of the year so far, like favorite comebacks of the year so far. Circle is just a very sincere song, especially in the context of the rest of the K-pop title tracks that have been coming out. So I really appreciate SM giving him something that's really sweet, something really meaningful and significant for the people who have been waiting for him to return from his military period. So I felt like it was the only like memorable song in the entire EP. So I'm gonna put this in B tier just because I really like the title track, but everything else wasn't able to kind of carry the weight of the expectation that I went in, because I've listened to the title track and I went into the EP thinking that it was gonna be more like standouts like that, but I putting it in B tier because I really like Onu's voice. I think that's one of the reasons why the EP is still salvageable. He just has a really pretty voice. Cool. And then I listened to Icarus by Kire. Now this is a 2022 or 2021 album, and he is a Chinese musician. My friend had recommended one of his songs to me, and we ended up both listening to the entire album. This is a really good album, so I'm putting this in A tier. Like if this had been released in 2023, like this year, I would have put it in S tier because it's so good. Just completely full of bangers, fully realized the sound and concept around it, but like each track is still different, like, but they together as a collective, they work really well. My favorite song is Sky. Like, I think that is a perfect song. And the other standout tracks in the album are Yes, No, Maybe and Gone. So I would really recommend giving this album a try. And then I listened to The Flag by Kwon Jina. Now I actually quite like this, so I'm putting this in A tier. So my favorite B-sides are These Days and As I Dream. So I really, really like those two actually. And then I listened to the Rover EP by Kai. Now I'm putting this in A tier too. The EP is sort of exactly what I expected it to be. Very smooth, very sexy, very sensual, and it leaned really heavily towards rap and R&B, which I feel like are genres that Kai is really, really well known for. I appreciate SM's like dedication to sticking to that direction for Kai, because it's a sound that like has worked well for him in the past and follows up really well with the EPs he's done in the past. But you can tell that it's something that he can really flourish in. It's a place where he can really show off his charisma, his versatility as a singer. Rover is a very catchy song. I actually really like the dance as well. And then I listened to Truth or Lie by Minhyun, and I'm pretty sure he is a member of Newest or an ex-member of Newest. I don't know if Newest is still together. Anyway, I decided to listen to this, and I'm actually gonna put this in C tier, like just because I just felt it was like perfectly average. He has a really nice voice, but I just don't remember anything from the EP. And sometimes that's like a really important way of measuring your experience with the album, right? It's like music is supposed to like change you. You know, like the piece of art is like significant enough to change you, then that really says something. I listened to this and I didn't really feel anything afterwards. And I guess it goes the same for this other album that I listened to called With Love from Ali and AJ. I'm also putting that in while I learned something new. And unfortunately, it's like I also kind of gave a similar grade to them in one of their other albums from the past, and I was like, oh, maybe it's just because I'm not in the right mood to listen to this particular genre when I had first listened to it. But I think if I keep saying that, maybe it says something. Like, when will I be like ready to listen to that sound? Maybe never. I think I'm just trying to be more forgiving, because I feel like music is so personal, and here I am being like, it was bad. You know, it's yeah. But anyway, speaking of bad, sorry. Oh my gosh, I promise I don't those the low blow. But then I listened to NMIXX's first album, Expergio. This is their first comeback after they had kicked out Ginny for whatever reason that might have been. Young, Dumb, Stupid is a choice. So I actually kind of liked it in the beginning. When I first heard it, I was like, okay, like, you know, it's cute. It's age appropriate because all of the NMIXX members are a bit young. So I thought it was like fine. And I didn't mind the like nursery rhyme chorus at first. But then I kept listening to it and I was like, I actually now feel like it's very irritating. Like the focal point of the song is the nursery rhyme and it itself is just very annoying. So the rest of the song is fine. Like the verses are good and even the later half of the chorus, na 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 feels so good, like is actually quite catchy. But it's really just that hook that I can't get over. It's like such a huge barrier in terms of liking the song. So I don't think I could ever get over it, especially because like that hook is the song that they were like they decided would be the thing that gets replayed off over and over because it's got the like dance challenge to it, right? So it's just a bit, obviously Love Me Like This is a better single in like so many ways. First, it's very catchy, it's very conducive to a dance trend. It just shows off the skills that NMIXX has as singers. However, there is a part of me that is quite sad at the thought of NMIXX abandoning their original sound. Obviously, their debut song and first comeback was very divisive, to say the least. I mean, personally, I loved OO and Dice, I hated. But you couldn't like make the argument that they were boring. You know what I mean? Like they really set themselves up for being a very unique group and very different to everybody else. But now I feel like they've sort of left that behind. And I don't know if things would have been different if Ginny didn't leave. I don't know if her departure had disrupted the planned trajectory that JYP had for NMIXX's signature sound. But I will mourn the loss of that unique concept. Maybe even if Ginny had stayed, it would have been the same song or the same sound. But we'll never know. Hopefully they keep doing their interesting stuff in the future. And maybe this is just like for this particular comeback. I'm putting this in C tier. Just because it's not bad. And honestly, like, it's completely salvaged by how incredible NMIXX are as singers. Like, Lily and Haewon and what's her name? Solyun, like completely belting, face-meltingly good high notes are like really carrying the entire EP. The rest of the B-sides are like nothing to write home about. Fun fact, I was super curious. I was listening to the EP for like, I think the third time for like reviewing purposes. And the track Just Did It was like, why does it sound like a Red Velvet song? And then I looked it up and it was like co-written by Kenzie, which is one of SM's prolific in-house songwriters who wrote several of Red Velvet's songs. So that's fun fact, the more you know. However, I am curious why. Anyway, I'm sure it happens all the time, but it was just so interesting that like different companies. What's up with that? I listened to While You Were Out by Boys World. I'm actually kind of obsessed with Boys World. I really loved So What. I saw their music video finally. It's been recommended to me by YouTube for so long, and one day I finally sat down and watched it and I was like, slay. So I decided to like do a bit more digging into their discography, and I really liked this EP. This was released in 2021, and I thought it was really, really fun, and it shows off the sass and personality of the girly pops. I'm putting that in French toast. And then finally, I listened to Face by Jimin. Now, as you can see, I am a BTS girly pop, BTS army. Anyway, so obviously I had to listen to this. Sonically, as an EP, like as a whole, it's not bad. There's a direction and there's a concept that is executed. But I don't think it's as a whole for me. Like, I think I only really liked one song, which is Like Crazy, which is the actual title track. So Like Crazy is, I think, the highlight of the project. It's really, really it's like a sound I really gravitate towards, and it's really interesting to finally hear it on Jimin's take on it. Set Me Free, which is Set Me Free Part 2, what's up with that, is the pre-release single, which I didn't actually like. I understood why it was a pre-release. And then the rest of the B-sides I thought was just like mostly forgettable, but I think it's just because I have never really been super aligned with Jimin's specific solo musical signature style. Yeah. But that's okay. I mean, it'd be like that. I have this conspiracy theory that even though this is his debut EP, he'll probably get a repackage later in the year that will add tracks to this EP, and so it becomes like a full album. And I got this idea because there's an interlude, but like it's the second track, and I'm like, why do you have the interlude? I think it's a hint to the repackage because BTS have done something similar when they did Map of the Soul Persona, which eventually became Map of the Soul 7. I'm sorry if that's wrong. Like, they've done that technique before, I guess. So that's why I think Jimin will have a second comeback. That's my conspiracy theory. And if I'm right, I predicted it. I would like to be right because I feel like a longer album will actually flesh out the ideas that were already introduced in the EP. And I feel like for something that well, like in an interview that Jimin did, he talked about how face has two meanings. Face as in his face, the face that people see, you know, your sense of self, but also the verb face, which is confronting, to confront, like to face something. I feel like that as a concept, that as an idea could have been explored more. Like I it's such a really interesting idea that I would have wanted to see more songs dedicated to it, and so that's why I feel like the EP is quite short. Like, I would like more songs to have done it more justice, if that makes sense. Here we are. That's what the tier list looks like at the moment. And here are the stats for this month. In total I listened to 16 albums and EPs, and 10 of them have been from 2023. And then here is a pie chart of my listening activity of the year so far. As you can see, I feel like I haven't really listened to a lot, at least compared to other people. I take too long to write these reviews, and the point of these reviews in the beginning was get me to start thinking more critically about the music I consume. But also I feel like I tend to listen to something and then move on to the next one without thinking about that EP enough. So that's why it's good that I force myself to give something a couple of more listens so that I actually form an opinion on them and not just like whiz past them. Because sometimes I'll listen to something and I'm like, oh, it's good that I've listened to this a couple of times because now I get it. If I had listened to it the first time, I wouldn't have gotten it. So anyway, sorry, that's a sidetrack. But thank you if you've reached this far into the video. Thank you very much for listening to me ramble about my music opinions. I usually post these videos on the first Friday of the month, but I got too busy with life. So hopefully this won't happen so often. So yeah, if you enjoy my music analysis, please feel free to subscribe and check out my other videos if you're so inclined. I post every week on Friday, or at least I try to. All my social media links are down in the description if you guys want to see more of my work, and if you want to support my work, my Ko-fi and Patreon pages are down in the description as well. And yeah, thank you so much. I'll see you guys next week. Yan. Got nothing to lose. 느끼도 던 하루 날 보고 싶어 라타타타 우린 심장